Mystics simple lives. They don't perform spectacular deeds, and they are not interested in miracles and power display. Yet they live in the presence of something that is greater than life. This, it sometimes seems, is all there is to it. Living in the presence of that which is the source of all being, yet is beyond being. And it is this living which is important to emphasize. This kind of living cannot be understood with the mind. The mind, which is accessible to most of us, is far too limited. There is nothing wrong with the mind in itself, except that as wayfarers on the mystical path, we learn not to demand of it that for which it has not been made. The mystical path goes straight, without dilly-dallying, straight into the heart of darkness, the heart of this dark light, which is the nothingness, full of infinite possibilities. So for this journey, the mystic leaves the mind behind. He learns not to rely too much on the mind. At the same time, this is not a blind journey. In fact, it is nothing but a blind journey. It is very much a journey of awakening, but not necessarily in the psychological sense of the word. In the human makeup, and I am not talking metaphorically, in the human makeup there is a real substance, an inner latent organ which awaits the right moment to awaken and grow. This substance is both tangibly real and also of the finest subtlety. We have many worlds within us, within our makeup, which is in the image of God. But not all of these worlds are accessible to our senses, or to our perception, or even to our imagination, although imagination is far subtler than our senses. Yet imagination too is far too gross to grasp the subtler entities and organs which we contain. Now this is really the difference between a psychological path of transformation and the mystical path. And it is worth realizing this from the outset. When we are drawn to the mystical path, what is really awakened in us is this dim response, the ever so elusive reverberations, almost unconscious, or at least uncontrollable by acts of will. This response to the subtle entity, this innermost organ within us, which belongs to the realm of the essence. This hidden organ is like the hidden treasure in the thick of the jungle, or like the pure and priceless pearl locked in the mouth of the great snake, as in the great hymns of the Gnostics. In order to reach it, we have to clear a path through the wild and thick forest, full of shadows and unfamiliar beasts, where no man has ever trodden before, where day turns into night because the rays of the sun do not penetrate there. We have to clear a path to our inner core, through our personal and archetypal shadows, through our instinctual needs, our temperamental inclinations, our social conditionings, our mental attachments and perceptions. This is a great heroic feat, and yet in itself it is only the means. The goal is the pearl itself, this pearl of high esteem, which is our connection with the worlds beyond, because it comes from the realms of real beauty, and from there it has been placed in our innermost and is waiting to be discovered, to be redeemed from the state of slumber, remoteness, exile, and alienation from our true essential being. We have in us this organ of incredible potentialities. Sufis call it the heart of hearts, or also the secret of secrets. And the journey, the mystical journey, is really towards this inner subtlety within us, because this is where the beloved resides. To quote a few lines from this Persian poet, Attar: if you would glimpse the beauty we revere, look in your heart, its image will appear. Make of your heart a looking glass and see, reflected there, the friend's nobility. Your sovereign's glory will illuminate the palace where he reigns in proper state. Search for this king within your heart. His soul reveals itself in atoms of the whole. The early Sufis were connected through different channels to ancient mystical traditions. Islam, which within an amazingly short period of time took over vast territories in the 7th and 8th centuries, came in touch with very ancient traditions which have nourished the mystical lives of many people for millennia. And somehow, within the womb and vessel of Islam, which even at the level of its name, Islam, which means surrender, proclaims the essential teaching of surrender, somehow within this vessel a new mystical tradition paved its path. A mystical tradition which at core has never been about spelling out numinous mysteries of the divine, but basically and essentially about learning how to empty oneself from what is transient and time-bound, what is accidental and temporary, so that that in us which is timeless and essential can be lived. From very early on, probably from the 8th century on, there have been groups of people in various centers within the Muslim world who worked together, usually with the guidance of one superior, more advanced in the mystical path, in order to reach within themselves that core of being, that pure, divine substance made of light, which resides within our innermost recesses, and without which knowledge of God cannot be attained. From the very earliest records, traditions have been preserved in which this teaching is proclaimed. In order to find God, look into yourself. He who knows himself knows his Lord. The organ within the human being, which thus became the focus of Sufi inner contemplation, was from the very beginning the heart. Within the depth of the heart lies the core of our being. There, in the darkness of the unknown innermost, resides the primordial light, which is man's birthright. A central symbol and metaphor for the light residing in the depths of the heart became a famous Quranic verse, the verse of light, from Surah 24, which is entitled the Light Surah. Surah is the word for chapter. And I'm going to quote now a few verses which talk about the metaphor of the inner light. God is the light of the heavens and earth. His light may be compared to a niche, wherein is a lamp. The lamp in a glass. The glass, as it were, a glittering star, kindled from a blessed tree, an olive that is neither of the east nor of the west, whose oil would almost shine forth, though no fire touches it, light upon light. God guides to his light whom he will. God speaks in metaphors to men. God has knowledge of all things. This is a powerful verse, and it has inspired generations of commentators of all levels of Islamic scholarship. Many interpretations have been offered for this enigmatic metaphor. Yet Sufis always understood the inner meaning of this symbolic description. It is a metaphor for the human heart in which God's light resides. In fact, it is even deeper than that. The bolder among the Sufi commentators were not afraid to take the verse at its face value. God is the light. Namely, God is light, and this light is in the heart. God is in the heart. So there is a niche, a recess, a corner, somewhere which is not tremendously exposed. It is somewhat withdrawn, somewhat hidden. It is also a shelf, a ledge, a place where a lamp or a candle can be placed in order to throw a gentle light over the space. In this niche there is a glass, and within the glass a lamp. The glass is shining like a glittering star because the lamp is lit. The light in the lamp makes the glass shine. But what is the fuel? Where does the oil come from? What kindles the lamp? The oil comes from a blessed tree, an olive, which is neither of the east nor of the west, beyond all limitations and boundaries of space, the tree of life, whose oil almost shines forth, though no fire touches it, light upon light. And all this imagery stands for the human heart. In the depth of the heart, too, a recess is imaged. And this is a special recess which holds the container within which the light of God resides. Layer within layer, container within container. And this latent light when it is connected with the eternal source of life, the tree of eternal life becomes kindled and its light shines forth. So this is an image of great potentialities. If only we find the recess within us, if only we keep the lamp clean, if only we are connected to the source of nourishment, energy, and light, if only God so wills. One of the earliest and boldest mystics within the Sufi tradition, who taught this inner meaning of the Quranic verse, and who has been intrinsically linked with our Naqshbandi tradition, is Abu Abdallah Muhammad ibn Ali al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi. He lived in the 9th century in the northeastern regions of Iran, which nowadays are known as Afghanistan. His hometown, Tirmidh, lies on the southeastern shores of the Oxus River in Central Asia, and it is within one of the Muslim states which used to be until recently part of the Soviet Union. He was a very unusual mystic, quite lonesome, outside the main circles of the mystics of his time, yet constantly keeping in touch. In spite of his aloneness, he has been highly regarded by generations of Sufis, and many esteemed teachers admitted to the blessing which they derived from his teaching, as well as from his spiritual energy, sometimes hundreds of years after his physical death. Bahauddin Naqshband, the teacher who gave his name to our tradition, regarded Abu Abdallah as one of his spiritual teachers. When I first came to Mrs. Tweedy, I gave her an abstracta of my dissertation on Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi. As she read it, she said, "My dear, he must be one of our ancestors. It is the same teaching as Bey Sab taught us. It is the same tradition." Only years after Mrs. Tweedy had made this statement, which was totally intuitive, I was shown by a member of our group the following saying of Bahauddin Naqshband. For the last 20 years, I have been following in the footsteps of Muhammad at-Tirmidhi. As he was colorless and featureless, so am I, colorless and featureless. He who knows, knows. Now, to be colorless and featureless in the Sufi tradition means to have become nothing, to have become devoid of all attributes and predicates. In other words, to merge within the source of all being. Bahauddin, who reached this ultimate stage, made this clear statement in which he attributed his attainment to the influence of this early mystic who had lived about 500 years before him. This is how the spirit works, and especially in our tradition, the Naqshbandi tradition, in which spiritual links beyond the limitations of time, space, and physical body have been intrinsic more than in any of the other paths within the Sufi tradition. I feel this is a very important feature for us. This is basically and profoundly the very reason why we here in another world, another time, another continent, and beyond the boundaries of institutional religion, can also be kindled by this olive tree, which is neither of the East nor of the West, and allow our hearts to be lit. So Abu Abdallah al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi taught that the way to reach God is through and by the divine light within our hearts. For him, the heart was the treasure house in which God had stored all divine knowledge. He writes, God placed the heart in the cavity of the chest, and it belongs to God alone. Within the heart, God placed the knowledge of Him, and He lit it with a divine light. By this light, He gave the heart eyes to see and ears to hear. The knowledge of God is thus identified in Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi's teaching with the knowledge of the heart. This is a very profound teaching. Mystics seldom speak directly. They usually adopt a language of allusions, a kind of metaphoric language. And yet, one of the greatest misunderstandings of a mystical text is to understand it on the metaphorical level. This is the case, for instance, with mystical poetry, especially this enchanting Persian poetry of Rumi, Hafiz, Attar. Their poetry is full of the most lofty and inspiring imagery, and so many people are in love with this poetry, intoxicated with it, and yet remain on the metaphorical level. One could say so many people remain on the artistic level of this poetry and do not go beyond it. And this can become an obstacle, a hindrance, a veil. The metaphors are always hints, allusions to the reality which in itself is beyond words. And yet it is this level of reality, beyond metaphors and symbols, to which mystics really aspire. Here are a few lines by Kabir, an Indian Sufi poet of the 15th century. Inside this clay jug there are canyons and pine mountains, and the maker of the canyons and pine mountains. All 7 oceans are inside, and hundreds of millions of stars. The acid that tests gold is there, and the one who judges jewels. And the music from the strings no one touches, and the source of all water. If you want the truth, I will tell you the truth. Friend, listen. God whom I love is inside. If we have a glimpse of what these images really allude to, we know that they allude to the reality, tangible and subtle at one and the same time, the reality of the inner layers, or as the Sufis would say, the inner stations, the inner subtle organs of the heart, which, as they become more accessible to us, enable our inner perception to widen up. These inner layers or inner stations, at the very depth of which God resides. So the heart and the stations of the heart are not to be taken on the metaphorical level. Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi was one of the first Islamic mystics who wrote down the mystical psychology of the wayfarer on the path. In the 9th century, he wrote a book which became a classic, The Journey of the Friends of God, in which he describes with minute psychological details the path of efforts and the effortless path. Many years ago, years before I had met Mrs. Tweedy, I had felt the timeless value of his teaching. It had been priceless for me in times of difficulty and bewilderment, and it had taught me, among other things, the polar practices of perseverance and thankfulness. In all his teachings, as I have already said, the heart takes a central position, but not necessarily the heart as we would think of. For him, as for all Sufis, contemporary and later ones, the word heart in fact denotes a complex organ made of layers, or rather of concentric spheres, one within the other, leading to the heart of hearts, where the mystical journey really takes place. Our journey, he says, is the journey of the heart to God, who is the beloved. The organic heart, he says, the physiological heart, is nothing but a hollow piece of flesh. But this hollow piece of flesh contains the mystery of our higher selves, our essences, as God's beloveds and God's elects. I'd like to read to you now some passages from one of the sources of the Naqshbandi teaching. This is what it says. Adam and his descendants, the whole of the human race, were created with a particular propensity, a particular inner form. This form is named by the names of He who is the source and the object of direct link, tawajjuh. It is characterized by His attributes. It has an essence to which the names and attributes relate. The impression of these attributes, names, and actions came into being together with Adam and all his descendants. However, some of Adam's descendants, due to the predominance of the lower nature and to the weakness of the essence of the perfected humanhood, have allowed this impression to efface. And some, however, have perfected it in themselves, and those have been called Naqshbandis. They who hold on to the impression imprinted upon their hearts, and in whom the impression is reinforced to be made permanent. The esoteric meaning of Naqshband is to strengthen the impression. Naqsh means to engrave, to make an impression, and band means to tie up, to bind, to reinforce. The name means, therefore, to bind the impressions of the true perfection in the heart of the disciple. At the beginning of the path, up until the time of Bahauddin Naqshband, the dhikr, the practice of recollection, used to be silent when practiced individually and audible when practiced in a group. Then the Sheikh Bahauddin ordered that it should be practiced silently at all times. This was due to an instruction which he was given by the Sheikh of his Sheikh, Sheikh Abdel Khalik al-Rujduwani, and this instruction was given by way of a spiritual communication. From then on, the dhikr had been practiced in silence, both individually and in groups. Practice this way, this meditation produces an intense impression in the heart of the disciple. This impression is Naqsh, and the meditation is band, namely binding together. Naqsh is the form of the blueprint which is impressed upon the heart. And to bind this blueprint means to impress it so that it becomes permanent and is not effaced. Abu Abdallah al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi also left a short autobiography. It is quite an extraordinary document, especially when taken against the background of literary conventions of his time. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first document by a Muslim mystic which describes personal mystical experiences and dreams. This document also tells us in an extraordinarily candid and frank way about the close relationships which Abu Abdallah had with his wife, whose name, unfortunately, he does not mention, but we may name her Abdallah, because this is the way she was referred to in the East. In fact, the inner link was so strong that she used to dream for him, teaching dreams. And now I would like to read to you one of his experiences and then one of his wife's dreams for him. He writes, "One night we gathered at the house of one of our companions for the dhikr. After several hours into the night, I returned home, and on the road my heart was opened in a way that I cannot describe. It was as if something was placed inside my heart, in which myself rejoiced and found delight. As I was walking, I felt full of joy. Nothing that I encountered frightened me. The dogs barked at me, but I found their barking friendly because of the pleasure I experienced in my heart. It seemed as if the sky with the moon and the stars were very near to earth. And all this time I was calling God. I experienced as if something was placed inside my heart. And when I experienced this sweetness, my stomach twisted and contracted, twisted inward out, squeezed from the intensity of this delight. The sweetness spread inside my loins and inside my veins, and it seemed to me that I was standing in the proximity of the heavenly throne. After this experience, he continues to tell about certain events in his life, and then there are records of several dreams which his wife dreamt for him. And here is one of the dreams which Abdallah dreamt for him, and which contains also a very clear and potent message for her. So here's the dream. She saw as if she were in the big hall of our house. There were couches there, upholstered with brocade. One of the couches stood next to the prayer space, which was part of the house. And this is what she told me. I saw a tree growing by the side of this couch, facing the prayer place. As I looked, the tree was growing in front of my eyes. It grew to a man's height, and it looked very dry, like a dry, withered piece of wood. It had branches similar to a palm tree, but the branches were all dry, like pegs or filings. Now from the bottom of the trunk, new branches appeared, about 5 or 6, and they were all green and moist. When they reached the middle of the dry tree, the tree began to stretch up and extend upwards until it grew to about 3 times a man's height, and so did the branches. Then from the middle of the branches, bunches of grapes appeared. And in my dream I said, "This tree is mine. No one from here to the bottom of the world has a tree like this." I came nearer to the tree, and I heard a voice coming from its roots, although I saw no one there. I looked at the trunk and saw that it had grown out of a rock, a big rock. And then by the side of this rock I saw another rock, big and with a cavity like a pool. From the trunk of the tree a spring emerged, and the water was flowing to the hollow of the rock and gathered there, pure water. Then I heard a voice calling me from around the tree. "Can you make a pledge to protect this tree so that no hand would touch it? Then this tree is yours. Its roots stand in sand and soil. Many hands have touched it, so its fruit became poorly, and then it rotted and dried up. But now we have placed the rock around it, and we have nominated a bird over it to watch over the fruit of this tree. Look." I looked and saw a green bird, the size of a pigeon, it perched on one of the branches, not the green, moist ones which grew from the bottom of the trunk, but on one of the dry branches. Then the bird hopped, climbing from branch to branch, and whenever it perched on a dry branch, one that looked like a dry peg, it became green and moist, and bunches of grapes hung down from it. And the voice said, "If you protect this tree faithfully, the bird will reach the top, so that it may become wholly green. But if not, the bird will stay here in the middle." And I said, "Indeed, yes, I will protect it." And there was no one there to be seen. The bird flew up to the top of the tree, branch after branch, and the whole tree became green. When it reached the top of the tree, I exclaimed with amazement, "La ilaha illallah! Where are all those people? Can't they see the tree and come closer?" And the bird answered from the top of the tree, "La ilaha illallah." And I wanted to pick one tender grape from the tree, but a voice said to me, "No, not until it has ripened." And I woke up. This autobiographical text ends with a passage which describes some mystical experiences of Abu Abdallah's wife herself. She has been carrying for him these dreams, which, he tells us, she kept having at dawn, and which, so he writes, needed no interpretation. And then she herself became drawn to walk her own path. Information about Sufi women does not exist in abundance. So here we have a record of this loyal, sincere, and highly intuitive woman whose dreams have been carefully and lovingly recorded by her husband. In one of these dreams, she is in fact told that they are both in the same place. In another dream, she saw herself and her husband sleeping together in the same bed. The Prophet Muhammad then came and lay down with them. In yet another dream, a healing and a teaching dream meant for her alone, she saw the Prophet entering the house. In the dream, she wanted to kiss his feet, but he would not allow it. "He gave me his hand," she told her husband, "and I kissed it. I didn't know what to ask of him. One of my eyes had been badly inflamed. So I said, 'Messenger of God, one of my eyes has been infected by inflammation.' He said, 'In this case, cover it with your hand and say, La ilaha illallah, the one without a partner. His is the kingdom, and his is the praise. He revives and he kills. He holds the good in his hand. He is the omnipotent one.' I woke up, and since then, whenever anything befalls me, I repeat these words, and the problem is lifted." So this unnamed woman from Central Asia more than 1100 years ago, has awakened through deeply identifying with her husband's inner process to search for her own inner reality. And this is how Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi ends this document. After these dreams, she felt an urge to search herself for truth. The first experience that she had, which confirmed the veracity of her dreams, was this. While she was sitting one day in the garden, 5 or 6 days after she had seen this last dream, these words descended upon her heart. The light and guide of all things. You are he whose light pierces all darkness. She said, I felt as if something penetrated my chest, pierced my heart, circulated and enveloped it. It filled my chest up to the throat, and I felt as if I was choking from its fullness. There was this heat inside me, and my heart was burning. And all the sacred names appeared to me in the glory. And whatever my eyes fell upon on the earth or in the sky, and whomever I saw them as I have never seen them before. Then a verse in Persian descended on my heart. We have given you one thing. And I was filled with joy, elation, and great energy. In the next day, she said, another verse descended on my heart. We have given you 3 things: our glory, our might, and our beauty. Then I saw this glow behind me, and it stayed above my head as if I saw it in a dream. And in this glowing light, these 3 things were revealed to me: the knowledge of divine glory, the knowledge of divine might, and the knowledge of divine beauty. Then I saw something shimmering and moving, and it was conveyed to me. These things are going to take place. All that moves is from him. The might and the high rank are from him, and so is the beauty and the merit. And this fire which I first saw in the sky is from him, and now I see it as sparkles of emerald and silver, blown and kindled. In the 3rd day, these words descended upon her heart: we have given you the knowledge of past and future. She remained in this state for some time, and the knowledge of the names of God was revealed to her. In each day, new names were opened up to her, and the glowing light was upon her heart, and the inward meaning of the names was revealed to her. This lasted for 10 days. And the 10th day she came to me and said, that the name, the kind and generous one, was revealed to her. And this is how the document ends. I brought a little toy with me, and the thing is that the whole image that I've tried sort of to point to via these traditions are about the heart being a complex organ and being made of layers within layers within layers, and in the way that it has been envisaged, it's actually concentric spheres, one within the other, almost in the same way, or actually exactly in the same way as medieval men have envisaged the cosmos, the universe. The universe was made sphere within a sphere within a sphere. So the heart was envisaged as an entity like the cosmos, made of all these inner layers. And in order to bring this image home, there is this little text also by Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi, who gives several metaphors, several similes. And the thing is always, as I said also in the presentation, the images, similes, metaphor, whatever we would like to call them, are important because otherwise we find it a little bit difficult to connect with these esoteric ideas, but at the same time they're not in themselves a reality. They always have to be taken as a sort of allusion or a hint to the reality which is beyond them. So first the gimmick, first the toy. There's one wrapping over, and there's a box, another container. So we do away with this, and then there's a globe, and it's really a globe. It has many worlds, stars, whole universes on this kind of soothing dark blue. And then we open, and there's another globe, and this too, it has planets and constellations, and this probably planet Earth, green and blue and so beautiful, but also the moon and Mars and Jupiter and other constellations. So this is an inner layer of the universe. And then there's another globe. And this one has the sun and the moon on it. Oh, that's anyway what I see. You may see something else. Just a face and another face. Then we open that. And that's supposed to be the kernel. It doesn't open anymore. And it has really, to me it's like the self. It has a face which could be either masculine or feminine. It's beyond gender, and it's the self. So this is one image. So then there are others. I'll just read. Know that the name heart is a general name which refers to all the inner layers and stations. The inner has spaces both outside the heart and inside the heart. The name heart resembles in this respect the name eye, since eye refers to all that is included within the rims of the eyelid, the white of the eye, the black of the eye, the pupil, and the light in the pupil. So there's a series of inner layers. Each one of these has a function specific to itself and an essence specific to itself, yet they are instrumental to each other and interlinked with each other. What is external is the container within which the inner lies, and the well-being of the light, the inner light, depends on the well-being of all these parts. This is actually a very interesting concept, because we usually tend to think the outer is not important, it has to be discarded. But what it says here, it's not exactly like that, because it also protects the inner. In the same way, the name house is a general name, since it relates to everything which is included within it. The rooms, the hall, the courtyard between the rooms, the bedchamber, and also the treasury or the storehouse. Each of these locations and spaces has a specific function distinguished from the rest. In the same way, the name Haram, which means a holy place, and it's also a name for the holy city of Mecca in the tradition of Islam. This name too is a general term, and it refers to the periphery of Mecca, to the city itself, and to the sacred house. And in each of these locations there are ceremonies and rituals which are performed uniquely there and nowhere else. These are quite interesting images to work with. In the same way, the name candelabrum, which is the general name for lamp. In the candelabrum, and now we have to imagine a kind of medieval type of lamp. So in this type of lamp, there is a special place for water. So it's a pot, it's an earthenware container with water, and then there is a place for the wick, and the wick's place is distinguished from the place of the water. So it's very clear that there are different containers. Inside the wick, light is contained. Light is believed to be this subtle entity which is there but is not seen, but it has to be there. Where the wick is placed inside the location, inside its location, there is oil. And where there is oil, there is no water. So there is a place for the oil. Now the wholesomeness of the whole lamp depends on the wholesomeness of all its different parts. If one of them is damaged, it damages the rest. If one of them is missing, the rest is useless. I could actually elaborate on this. I do not wish to do it now, but just to hint in a probably important direction, is that this is really why practices are given not for any moral merit, but in a sort of alchemical way to clean or to make whole or to repair, so that the containers can be wholesome. Think about it. In the same way, the name almond, the fruit almond, is also general. It includes the outer skin, which covers the hard skin. Then there is a second skin, which is like the bone and marrow. And then there is the kernel, which is within. And within the kernel, there is the oil, which is the essence of the almond. So these are a few images, and they all relate in an analogical way to the heart. Know that this faith and the mystical path has signs and stages, and that the followers of this path have ranks, and the teachers of this path have rungs, different ranks and rungs. The higher the knowledge, now that's important, the higher the knowledge, the more concealed it is, the more special, the more guarded, the more secret, and the more hidden. So all these, that's the essence, and that's very well guarded, not always seen. Yet the layman may use the name heart for any of the inner spaces. So you have to know, it's a kind of science. The chest in relation to the heart, now we come to the heart. The chest in relation to the heart is like the white of the eye in relation to the eye, or like the court of the house in relation to the house, or like the peripheries of the holy city, or like the container of water in the lamp, or like the outer skin of the almond. The chest is the location where instincts and impulses are located, through which harmful affects might come in, just like the pustule which may infect the white of the eye, or the irritation of the ophthalmic vein, or other eye diseases which are caused by infection, or like the firewood and the refuse which are placed in the courtyard, into which sometimes strangers wander, or like the wild animals and cattle which may penetrate the peripheries of the holy place, or like moths and other insects which fall over the water in the lamp, or like lice, mosquitoes, and little flies which creep into the exposed skin of the almond. If it cracks, all the little vermins penetrate within. So I think you have a clear idea. That which enters the chest is not immediately felt. This is the space into which malice, lusts, desires, and needs enter, instinctual needs. At times it is contracted, at times it expands. This is the domain of the lower self. It has direct access into it, and from here, the lower self, which is called nafs, you may have heard this term. So from here, the nafs manipulates, acts, grows haughty, and really tries to manifest its power. And this is also the location of the light of the religious law. So the religious law it belongs to the periphery, to the outer. It doesn't belong to the inner. This is also the location where memory of acquired knowledge is located. External knowledge, which is acquired from studying the science of law, tradition, and everything that can be expressed verbally. And from here, from the chest, the impulses and the needs emerge, and from here, ideas of useful actions may also come into the heart. In the Arabic, there is a kind of word play on the name of the chest, which is sadr, and the name for the outgoing of the impulses and the decisions, which is sadara. So it comes from the same root, and there is a connection. Then, so this is the outer layer of the heart, the chest. Then there is an inner layer, which is properly called the heart, qalb in Arabic. And this is the second station. It lies within the chest, and is like the black of the eye within the white of the eye. I mean, those who have blue eyes, have to give up, because the image comes from the Orient. This is the abode of the light of faith, the light of humility, piety, love, contentment, certitude, fear, hope, perseverance, and such like. And this is also where the roots of knowledge grow. The heart is like a source of water, and the chest is like a pool of water. From the source, water flows into the pool, and there they gather. Now, if you remember the image from the dream, this is exactly what was in the dream. There were two rocks, and the stream, they emerged from one of them, flowed to the other, gathered there, and there it stayed. So it's interesting that there is a link here. So the inner knowledge that comes from the source, from its source, which is the inner heart, sometimes goes out and flows from the heart into the chest, so it can become manifest and externalized. Certitude, inner knowledge, and sincere intentions are stirred up within the heart, and from there they enter into the chest. The heart is the root, and the chest is the branch, and the branch is made firm by the root. Action is the domain of the nafs, the lower self, but the extent of its domain in the chest depends upon the intention which comes from the heart. With God's compassion, the heart may not be subordinate to the nafs, because the heart is the king and the nafs is the kingdom. In our tradition, it has been said, and it's also reiterated in Mrs. Tweedy's book, that we don't try to eliminate the little self. It cannot be eliminated. It has to be integrated. And it has to become in service of the king, which is the heart. Baysab said, we work on the heart chakra because the heart is the king. If the king is worthy, the whole kingdom is worthy. And this is exactly the tradition that is recorded here, attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. If the king is worthy, his army is worthy. If the king is corrupt, the army is corrupt. And the king is the heart. The Prophet thus explained that the organs of the body are wholesome inasmuch as the heart is wholesome. The heart is like a lamp. The proper functioning of the lamp depends on the light. If the heart is devoid of light, of the light of God, it is like a lamp, the light of which had been extinguished. So this more or less covers the second station, or the second layer, which is properly called the heart. But now there is an inner layer, which could be translated into the inner heart, although in Arabic it has a very specific name, al-fu'ad. So this inner heart is the third station. And this is like the pupil within the black of the eye, or like the holy shrine within the holy city, or like the bedchamber and the treasury in the house, or like the wick in the center of the lamp, or like the kernel within the almond. The inner heart is the place of divine knowledge, ideas and visions. Whatever good a human being acquires, it is the inner heart which first acquires it, and only subsequently the heart. In other texts, there's a very elaborate descriptions and almost a kind of science, or this is the special psychology of Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi, where he writes about how the outer heart has got eyes, and these eyes have to be opened, and they open in two directions. They open inwardly and they open outwardly, and also ears. So these things that are in the inner layer have to be somehow communicated to the outer layer. And this is done through the inner senses, which, as I've tried to say, are very subtle, but they are real. The inner heart is in the center of the heart, as the heart is in the center of the chest, like the pearl within the shell. So then we come to the fourth layer. So there's the chest, the heart, the inner heart, and the kernel of the heart, or the seed of the heart. This also has in Arabic a special name, lub. And this kernel within the inner heart is like the light of seeing within the eye, like the light of the lamp within the wick of the candelabrum, like the oil which is concealed within the kernel of the almond. Now, all the external parts are the protection and cover of that which lies inside them. That's interesting. And all of them resemble each other. There are analogies, similarities, and reciprocity between each other. There is accord among them, not discord, ideally, of course, because all of them are the lights of faith, and faith is one. Only the ranks of the faithful differ and are varied. The kernel is the location of the light of oneness and the light of uniqueness, and this is the most perfect light. Now, in order that we don't think that this is a closed entity, there is a last paragraph. Beyond this, there are many more subtle stations, many more exalted spaces, and many more exquisite subtleties. And the root of all of them is the light of oneness. The unspoken of stations, those which are beyond the ones mentioned, can be seen only by a human being who, with God's help, is endowed with the understanding of the stations which were here described by metaphors. To such a one, the stations which are beyond these mentioned become distilled, like the increased purity of water when it is allowed to stand longer in the vessel. By these metaphors, the unspoken of secret path is comprehended.
If you might talk a bit more about how the practices relate to this process. You mentioned it very
That's why
lastly.
it happened.
Yeah.
Does Atalmidi talk about that?
Yes, he talks actually. This is an extract of a little book that he writes, and for him, being a Muslim, this outer had very much to do with abiding by the religious law. This is the external aspect of the religious life, and it's very important. I mean, what is important, and it has always been important, is to create a framework. Now, to use this in a kind of another way, we can sort of make out a circle. This is another image that Sufis use, and it relates to that. And the outer circle is called the religious law, and the Arabic name for it literally means the highway. And that's the circumference. Now, inside the circumference, inside this sphere, there is this hidden truth, which is the inner reality one's higher self, the divine light, can be named in many different ways. It's like an elusive point. It cannot actually be pinpointed, but it's there. Now, from the circumference to the center, there are numberless paths. And they are the paths of the Sufi tradition, the different paths of the Sufi tradition. So it's as if one lives practically on three levels. One level is the external, is the framework. Let's say the group, the ethos of the group, what one does to another, the service in a group. Sufis always worked in groups. Always, I mean, there were those lonesome Sufis who did not, were kind of recluse, but usually there were groups, and the group was very important in that sense that there were practices that had to be kept. First of all, the practices of the religion, of the religious law that one belonged to, the traditional sense Islam, and then the practices of the group, which had a lot to do with generosity. Generosity in the deepest sense of the word. There are terms that are used, generosity or chivalry. The whole ethos of the knights in the Middle Ages has a lot to do with Sufi manuals about chivalry and generosity. And the most important practice is one that is called in Arabic ithar, which means giving precedence to the other. So let's say, just to give one example, in the Muslim tradition, which relates to the outer circumference, in prayer, when one goes to the mosque to pray, there are rows. And in the first row, the most eminent people in the community sit. And then it goes, the nobler and the more eminent and important sit in the first rows, and the rest of the congregation sit at the back rows. Now, in the Sufi tradition, it's the other way around. It's like, okay, you sit in the first row. And this is a practice of ithar. Or when eating together, one gives the best morsel to one's friend. You can imagine how this can cause riots if it doesn't come from the right place. People can fight. No, you take it. No, you take it. That's everything can become shadowy, of course. But so these are kinds of practices, and then when it comes closer to the core, this is the meditation. So it's like three layers of
And has the silent meditation always belonged to this Naqshbandi path, or was it just the silent zikr at the beginning? Does Al-Tirmidhi talk about the meditation practice?
Yes, he does, and he talks. There's not much, or at least there's not a clear difference between zikr and meditation. I suppose, in a way, we have to work as if the two are not absolutely the same. But in fact, according to the tradition, they are the same. And so in his time, there were already circles of Sufis which used to do a lot of audible practices and even sing and dance and have music and become really ecstatic through the music. And some teachers felt that it's important because this type of process generates so much energy that especially for the young disciples or for the novices, it's important to have an outlet. So although I didn't find any teacher who wrote about this audible and ecstatic practices in a very favorable way, they did allow it because they felt that psychologically it's good as an outlet. What? For the young ones. For the young ones. And so he relates to this and he says, I mean, all this is illusion. All this is illusion. It's just you can reach God only in silence, because the whole thing is about reaching that inner space which is beyond words and beyond music and beyond ecstasy and beyond longing. So it's very much a silent meditation. Now, there's one more thing which has to do with the process in which the practices become, and the experiences become more and more introvert. And this is a very particular path which the Naqshbandis have taken from earlier groups of Sufis. Again, groups of Sufis which worked against any ostentation, if one may say so, any appearance, any sign which will distinguish them from any other ordinary member of the community. So that's something which is quite interesting, because most of the Sufi groups created some kind of distinguishing marks, like, let's say, a blue robe or a patched frock or a certain way of holding the rucksack or the staff, or certain marks of distinction. There were also ascetic practices that some Sufi groups would take, like walking without shoes, or riding on donkeys rather than horses, because in the Muslim communities that was a very denigrating thing, because only the non-Muslims were riding donkeys. So if a Muslim rode a donkey instead of a horse, it would really be a kind of ascetic practice in order to humiliate himself. So all these practices, which were kept in the 9th century and also later on, these groups that were more akin to Tirmidhi and to the people of the path of blame, which is a very related group. It did not belong to them, but very related, very much related. So they said that everything that speaks about where we are outwardly has to be eliminated. We are nobodies. Nothing can tell what we are, because we are nothing. And there is a story that about someone whose nickname was, his name was Bishr, and his nickname was the Barefoot. So he came once and knocked at the door of some Sufi, and the daughter asked, "Who is there?" And he said, "Bishr, the Barefoot." And she said to him, "Here are two coins. Buy yourself a pair of sandals and get rid of this name." This is kind of thing. What's the big deal? Yeah. And there are many stories like that, and that's why these type of Sufis were always advocating the disciples to have a profession, so that they can be sort of, he is the bath attendant or the hairdresser or the shoemaker. And it's very clearly said. The disciple comes to the teacher and says, is it good for me to follow a profession, to go for training, like we would say, know. Is it not a waste of time? I just want to sit and do my meditation all day long. Why should I take a profession, go through the training? No, the teacher says, you have to take a profession because it's better for you to be known as Abdallah, the bath attendant, than as Abdallah the mystic. So what it means really is that ultimately the experiences are becoming more and more introverted. And it's even more than that. I mean, it's even more than that because that's very difficult to talk about. Not because I don't want, but because I don't have the words for it. Because in this vision of inner layers, there's also the vision that the deeper we go, the more secretive, the more hidden, the more unspoken our stage is. And it becomes so also to our mind. So it's not only that we don't externalize for the outer world anything, nobody knows what we do, but it's also that somewhere we don't know. We absolutely don't know. And these people who were very close to Hakim Tirmidhi, they talked about 4 different levels of meditation. There's the meditation, and they talk about dhikr. Okay, so there is the remembrance which is done with the tongue. Okay, like could be la ilaha illallah or whatever mantra is given to this group of seekers. So it's done, and it's done with devotion, and it becomes part of the human being. But then it goes one stage deeper, and it becomes the dhikr of the heart. And then it goes one stage deeper, and it becomes the dhikr of the inner heart. And then it goes one step deeper, and it becomes the meditation of the secret. And it's sound, they say. How do you know that it's sound? If you know about it, then it's not sound. If it comes to consciousness, if you're aware, okay, you are not doing it with the tongue. It's totally introverted, and it's taking over, and it's wonderful. But you are aware of it. You're not quite there. You are not quite there. That's very difficult to explain. When it reaches this point of tranquility, it becomes nothing, and yet it's aligned. That's it. Yes. Yeah. And that's why it's called secret. The word for this innermost recesses of the heart is called secret.